All right, folks, apocalyptic. That's the word that comes to mind when it comes to describing what's going on in California right now. Just devastating fires that we've been reporting on all morning long. And look, you look at what's going on, and it's just unbelievable. Goes without saying. And these Santa Ana winds and the dry conditions, bone dry. I mean, we're talking no rain in California in the Los Angeles area for 100+ days. The number is staggering. And of course, you combine that again with the winds, and it's just and resources, a lack of resources, and add to all that a lack of water. There's a serious issue when it comes to water in that part of California. Fire hydrants don't have any water hooked up to them. There's no place really to gather up water for water bombers when it comes to lakes. The ocean is there, but that's problematic for a lot of reasons. And 90 miles an hour, I think, is the number that I've heard that some of these fires are marching at 90 miles. And again, I'm pretty sure that's the number that I'm going off memory now that I've heard. So fire is enveloping entire regions, entire neighborhoods, and more deaths will occur as a result of this. But you look at it at the imagery and the maps, and you wonder, how will they ever contain this? I mean, obviously it'll get contained somehow, some way, but it makes you wonder how. And resources are pouring into that region from other jurisdictions, including Canada, from what I hear, and rightfully so. But look, forest management is an issue. There's a lot of talk that there's not been proper forest management in California or in this part of California. And forest management is something that we hear concerning our region as well. Because some forest management and silviculture, and in particular where there are power lines, you have to manage that, because if you don't, you have too much underbush. It's dry, tinder dry, and if that's not cleaned out on a regular basis, again, particularly along transmission lines, then this results. So this is quite a story, folks. And of course, adding to the allure of all of this is the fact that a lot of celebrities, including Canadian actor Eugene Levy, live in this area and are impacted by this. Multi-million-dollar homes along the ocean front destroyed, just leveled. And it's something to be seen. And it's, again, we don't think that you don't think these types of things are ever going to happen to you until they do happen. And we've seen this here in the Upper Tantall and Hammonds Plains area. And, of course, the southern part of the province as well, a couple of years ago. And you just hold your breath that these types of things don't happen. But it's just these dry conditions and changing weather patterns, and again, lack of forest management, all culminate into these events. And it's just devastating. You can imagine how devastating this is. And where will it end? Also, Donald Trump, how serious should we be taking him here? We talked about this yesterday on the show. Melanie Joly, the foreign affairs minister, says that we can't take the bait. What does that even mean, can't take the bait? I don't understand what type of comment that is. I don't know how to respond. I don't know how we should respond to what Trump is doing. There's discussion about retaliatory tariffs now. And how much leverage do we have? Of course, Doug Ford talked boldly a week ago or so about cutting power off into the United States, which flows from Ontario. We have energy exports, quite a bit of energy exports. I think 75% or something like that of our oil goes south of the border. So I don't know what leverage we have. Retaliatory tariffs. How can we? And if we go down that road, then where's it end? So look, people say that Donald Trump's a bully. Yeah, I think most people would agree that he probably has those character traits. And how do you deal with a bully? Well, if you back down, we all know what happens if you start backing down. But by the same token, if you step up and you're hitting above your weight and you don't have enough leverage, then it can go really bad. So I don't know. But what I do know is that the timing could not be worse when we have a prime minister who's on his way out, a lame duck prime minister, if that's the right term. a government that is prorogued, and Trump, the massive wild card. So I want to ask you about this. What are your thoughts? How seriously are you taking Donald Trump's claims to force us, to bring us to our knees through economic measures, to capitulate, to want to be the 51st state of the United States? I mean, it sounds ludicrous and ridiculous as I'm saying it. But just yesterday, Donald Trump posted a map on his social media page of the two countries without a border and the United States flag in both countries. I mean, this guy and what he's talking about with Greenland and the Panama Canal, where does it end? I don't know. We'll continue to talk about this. So lots to get to today, and I'd like to thank you so much for tuning in and listening. We'll open the phone lines between 11 and 12. Again, look forward to hearing from many of you, as I'm sure we will, and I'm sure Donald Trump's name will come up. I'd like to thank Vanessa Vandeness on the other side of the glass of the control board, doing a fine job as always. All right, Nova Scotia is reporting a 35% drop in the number of hours emergency departments were closed across the province, though many rural ERs continue to struggle with chronic closures. Tanya Penney, Nova Scotia Health Senior Director of the Emergency Program of Care and the Executive Director for the Central Zone, joins me to discuss all of this. Tanya, thanks for joining the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, so look, I guess it's some good news here, 35% drop in the ER closures. That's the good news. Let's start there, I suppose, right?
Yeah, that is the good news, for sure. That's been a significant drop since this report started a number of years ago.
All right, what are some of the more challenging numbers here that we're looking at?
Well, exactly as you said, right? There are some smaller rural emergency departments in Nova Scotia that are really important to serving their communities, but at times there continues to be challenges related to clinical staff, in particular nursing staff and physicians, to operate those emergency departments safely. So we are still seeing some significant issues in some of the smaller rural sites in Nova Scotia.
All right. What short of fixing the staffing challenges? I mean, that's the problem 101, is it not? There's not much beyond the staffing issues. If you had the staffing, the budget's there, the numbers are. It's not as though it's a budgetary item, is what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, no, I would agree, Todd. There's lots of initiatives happening at the provincial level, particularly through government, that's trying to increase the number of nurses and physicians in the province, and so. A number of things have been announced over the past couple of years, and I'm probably not going to get the months and the years right, Todd, so I'm just going to kind of list them and certainly can follow up if you want a specific timeline related to them. But, we increased seats in Dalhousie, St. FX, and Acadia's nursing programs. Cape Breton University, as you know, is implementing a medical school outside of Dalhousie for the first time, and that's set to open in February 2025. We've got expedited pathways for internationally educated nurses to join Nova Scotia. So, there are all of the things that we're putting in place across the province. Will help with that over the next coming months and years.
Okay, so when it comes to retention, obviously we know that these are highly stressful jobs. Working in an emergency department is probably one of the most stressful environments you could ever imagine working in. I would think that retention is a challenge here. Outside of pay, is there some things that can be done to help retain workers?
Yeah, so we've been doing some really exciting things across most of our emergency departments in the province around making sure that people have the right staff in their emergency departments. And so I think, Todd, we actually talked about this last year where we added patient advocates to the waiting room, which really helped to make patients in the waiting rooms of some of our emergency departments, help with their wait times. And then waiting room care providers, which is a licensed staff that also helps the triage process in those emergency departments. The addition of nurse practitioners in emergency departments and physician assistants. And so really kind of, making sure that we've got the right people in those emergency departments and the teams around them. That's one of the biggest probably retention tools in the emerge departments that we've focused on, just to make sure that nurses and physicians, which were typically the model a number of years ago, really feel like they have those extra interdisciplinary supports, social work, physiotherapy, those sorts of people have joined the team of late, Todd. So it really is around making sure that the teams are fulsome. And patient care is being delivered in a way that, traditionally, like I said earlier, those nurses and physicians feel supported in that patient care space.
Now, what type of feedback are you getting from healthcare workers? Are you hearing that these are positive moves?
Yeah, so I'm not aware of kind of a formal survey, Todd, but certainly kind of, in my conversations at a number of emergency departments over the last little while, there still remains kind of, a frustration from a flow perspective. With patients not moving out of the emergency department fast enough. That said, they are seeing some changes with the additional interdisciplinary support. And so I think there's some hope across emergency department staff, that's for sure. And that's just my experience, Todd. I don't know of a formal survey that we've done of late.
But that might be something that would be worthwhile is getting the temperature or checking, engaging with people, how these moves are, I guess, figuring out or trying to find out where people are, trying to be proactive as opposed to just waiting for people to get frustrated and leave, I suppose. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, and I think that maybe, is a misstep on my part, Todd, not explaining kind of how it was that we implemented some of these changes in emergency departments over the past number of months and couple of years. Certainly we have been, emergency department leadership and emergency department staff, nurses, and physicians have been involved in that work right from the get-go. So I think our engagement across emergency department staff is high, and we're trying to work in the leadership team to make sure that, we're listening and we're adding interdisciplinary staff where appropriate. So, I completely agree with you from an engagement perspective, but we have been doing it all along and continue to, and we'll need to make sure that we continue that engagement with clinicians and physicians in all communities and all emergency departments across the province.
Yeah, I guess in a perfect world, there wouldn't be any ER closures, right? But that's probably not realistic. What is the realistic goal for Nova Scotia Health when it comes to ERs? What's realistic?
Yeah, well, we try and kind of look at things from a community perspective and geographical location across the province. There are some facilities that are geographically closer to other facilities, and so there is some sites, that are not open 24 hours a day. You think about Cobequid, you think about Fisherman's Memorial, and their close proximity to other emergency departments. And so there is some scheduled closures that we have been able to implement over the past. That seem to make sense depending on that geographical location. And then there are others, Todd, that are just geographically too far away from the next closest open emergency department. And that's really where our focus has been on the recruitment and retention to make sure that those places are open and that people in the communities feel safe. There are some things that we've been doing since COVID that have been really exciting. Virtual urgent care, for example. So if you arrive to, any one of the 21 emergency departments where we have it implemented, if you show up there, you could be seen by an inpatient physician or a virtual physician. And so access to care closer to home is really where we're focusing our efforts right now.
Okay, Tanya, appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks so much. Have a great day.
All right, take care. Tanya Penney, Nova Scotia's Health Senior Director of the Emergency Program of Care and the Executive Director for the Central Zone. A chat with Claudia Chender when we come back. Claudia Chender, leader of the NDP here in Nova Scotia, joins us for a chat. Claudia Chender, thanks for doing this. We appreciate your time, as always.
So much for having me.
All right, so a legislative calendar. We are the only province in this country that operates without one. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. We have no set time that Nova Scotians representatives are in the legislature debating the policies and laws that impact them. And Nova Scotians don't really know what to expect in terms of how bills are made and when they would have an opportunity for input or to understand those changes. And we, right now we're into January and we haven't even heard from the Houston government when committees will start meeting, let alone when we'll go back into the legislature. So it's sort of like the fixed election date thing. We have a guy who really made his reputation on campaigning for transparency and good governance, and we've just sadly seen the opposite.
Yeah, and of course we know that this government doesn't seem to like being in the ledge either, and we know that that sitting governments typically don't like to be in the ledge. But the track record has not been good when it comes to days sitting. What's this government's track record when it comes to that?
Oh yeah, well, as you say, Todd, no government likes to be scrutinized. They just want to get on with their agenda. But, the reality is if a government has an agenda and knows what that is, then they should stand up and share it with Nova Scotians and defend it. And their track record on that is terrible. We've started out in 2021 with sittings that went to midnight on the first day with no calendar, we had 30 days notice. At one point, we had an emergency sitting that brought us back in the middle of the summer to quash something that, the premier didn't like. Mm-hmm. He then changed tactics to having more reasonable sitting hours, but to putting every single legislative change they wanted to make into one bill. So this kind of American style omnibus bill that makes it really, really difficult for Nova Scotians to understand what those changes are. So I would say the track record is bad. MLAs work all year round, regardless of party, regardless of whether we're in the legislature, we're in our offices, and we're advocating for people and meeting with people and working on stuff. But that legislative piece is a big part of why we're elected, to make sure that we're making good choices and good policy decisions. And increasingly that all happens behind closed doors without much communication.
Yeah, for sure. So what type of lead up would you like to see in a perfect world? How regimented can you set the calendar? Because I suppose the beginning you could look at, but how long a session sits might depend on what's happening and what type of challenges and work needs to be done at that time.
Totally. And that's exactly our proposal. So long before I became leader of the party, as House Leader before that, I've been introducing legislation since I think 2018, based on best practices across the country. So as you say, we would have a start date, not necessarily an end date. And so right now, all we need to do, according to the legislation, is to meet once in the spring, once in the fall. There's no definition of that. And that's it, really. So what we would say is we need to meet in the spring and meet in the fall. Let's put a date on that. And, we're flexible on what that means, whatever, like third week of September, let's say, for fall, or third week of March for spring. It doesn't really matter, just so that there's some certainty so people understand when that's happening. And then to put some teeth around what the times look like. So, for the first month, let's say, we sit regular hours. And then, if things are gridlocked or not working or there's urgency, of course, there's some flexibility to change all that. And frankly, with, the government's current majority, they can change those rules anyway because they just need 2/3 to do that. But again, just to have some kind of baseline of good governance, they have a strong mandate. There's no question. And so the question is, are they going to use that to further sort of weaken our democratic systems here in Nova Scotia? They haven't done any of the things that they've said they were going to do in terms of strengthening democracy, whether it's a legislative calendar, order-making powers for the Information and Privacy Commissioner, any of those, reinstating elected school boards. They made a number of promises through these last campaigns, none of which have been kept when it comes to transparency, openness, good governance. And they have such a strong majority that they're going to pass their legislation anyway. They're going to get their agenda through. But the question is, are Nova Scotians going to be able to understand what it is and have a say? Or are they going to push it through in the dark, as they have done for the last several years? And we're, clearly advocating for the former.
Yeah, on the order-making power over on behalf of, that would include the Auditor General, would it, or no?
No, I don't think that promise was ever made,
Yeah.
nor was it requested. But
Right.
certainly what we've seen is that, we have a convention where when the Auditor General makes a recommendation, except for in really exigent circumstances, a government will accept those recommendations and work towards them because we accept that the Auditor General is unbiased and expert and is making important recommendations. And one of her biggest ones through the last number of years has been the amount of spending outside of the budget process. So we have a government that is literally spending over $1 billion a year without any debate, without any transparency, without telling anybody what that is. That is a huge problem. It's a problem, again, we're an outlier. I think we're if not the only, one of the only jurisdictions that allows that to happen. And it has real issues for understanding whether or not we're spending our money wisely. And we know in many cases we're not. When we look at the Auditor General's reports on what's happened at Hogan Court with the healthcare facility, it's great to have a transitional care facility. We probably spent about $100 million too much getting it up and running. We're giving unsolicited bids to people like Goodall for, search engine optimization. $43 million. Is that the best use of $43 million? Probably not. But we don't have a chance to discuss that or understand it or see it with any transparency. And again, the government is ignoring those recommendations. And we have to ask the question, why? They can do all of that anyway. They have a majority. So why are they scared of coming to the public and being clear with what their agenda is, explaining why they're making the decisions they're making, and keeping those decisions open to public scrutiny? That's democracy. That's the system that we all think that we live in, but we're not seeing a lot of respect for it from this group.
All right, so as of now, there have been no scheduled meetings for the standing committees of health or community services or human nothings or any of these committees to meet. Nothing's
been
scheduled.
Established.
Wow, yeah.
They don't even exist.
Right.
So normally when the speaker is sworn in, which happened in, I can't remember, late November, early December, at that date, those committees could have been established. But the government chose not to do that. And now it's, we're ticking towards the middle of January, and we've heard nothing from the government House Leader on when that will happen. Again, very concerning. These are the bodies that exist, and, quite frankly, they could have, we can have a whole nother conversation about committees and how they could be more useful, but they're all we've got in terms of looking at these various areas, in particular health and public accounts, and they don't exist. Why?
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's it, right? You have to it leaves people to speculate as to why. Exactly.
And there is, from my perspective, there is no good reason.
Yeah.
And if there is, the government should really share with us what it is.
Sure.
Because, they can put out press releases saying that things are going well, or, use our money to put out whole shiny booklets touting their own accomplishments in advance of an election, and what I would say is an ethically borderline use of our taxpayer dollars. But at the end of the day, that's propaganda. And so that's fine. It might be true. I don't know. Could be true. But we have no way to test it. And that's how we test those assertions of government. We test it in committee. We test it in the legislature. We ask questions. We look for information. And we have precious little opportunity to do that on behalf of Nova Scotians these days.
Okay, Claudia, I appreciate your time. We'll do it again. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, take care. Claudia Chender, leader of the NDP. Nova Scotia clinics out to boost supply of blood available to dogs in emergency cases. We'll talk with Jeff Goodall when we come back. All right, joining us for a chat, Dr. Jeff Goodall, who runs the Sunnyview Animal Care Centre in Bedford and is a regular has a regular appearance on the show every month, the last Thursday of the month for Ask the Vet. No, it is not Ask the Vet. It's out of context, I know. But Dr. Jeff Goodall, I lost Dr. Jeff Goodall. He's no longer on. After a lead up like that, imagine. He must have hung up. He's like, you know what? When all is said and done, on second thoughts, I don't want to talk to Todd today. He just hung up. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure that it was not intentional. By the way, we will open the phone lines between 11 and 12 today to find out what is on your mind, and I'm sure that many of you will want to continue to talk about Donald Trump. All right, let's try Dr. Jeff Goodall again. Dr. Jeff Goodall, what happened? You bailed on me. Why?
I think it's my fault. I think I bumped my cell phone. But anyway, sorry for that. How's everybody? How's everything going?
Hey, we're all right. We're okay. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. I'm glad to hear you're still doing well, and I'm doing okay, so could be worse.
It could be worse for sure. Okay, so normally we talk to you the last Thursday of every month, and we take calls, and it's a very popular segment. But when I saw this story, I thought I would reach out to you as well because it's something that I don't think a lot of people talk about. And it was a CBC story. I'll read the headline. Nova Scotia clinics out to boost supply of blood available to dogs in emergency cases. Canadian Animal Blood Bank opening processing center in the region. So this is, for whatever reason, people don't think of this. I don't think of it. And but obviously when it comes to surgeries and emergencies, it's just like human beings, right? You need blood.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't experienced too many cases where that's been necessary. So it's a great opportunity for us all to be reminded of it. I do know that Metro Animal Emergency Clinic and Coastal keep a stock or a supply of blood on hand. It's typically dog blood, mind you, from the Canadian Animal Blood Bank in Winnipeg. But yeah, I could not get a hold of someone from the Canadian Animal Blood Bank to find out where the local processing center is going to be. But I will say, and I'm not dropping names here, but let's let the listeners know, the Maritime Emergency Referral Clinic is going to be setting up its own operation. So I don't know if that's in concert with it'll probably be in concert with the Canadian Animal Blood Bank, not in competition. But that's going to be something that's coming in the next few months. But I think it's great that Truro Clinic got this in the news because it is true. My staff have had their dogs give blood before for certain situations. It's not common. It might not even be once a year in our clinic, but it is something that's out there. The technology is getting better. There's actually 12 different blood types in dogs.
Wow.
But it appears only 3 or maybe 2 are really significantly of concern. But no, so that's the long short of that. I mean, it's a great opportunity. If people are interested, you can go to the Canadian Animal Blood Bank website for the donation, better way to say it, donor clinics that are coming up. And there's a few in Nova Scotia now, which is great. There's one in Basin View, obviously Fundy Vet and Truro Vet. So there you go.
Okay, how often do you need blood for an animal with an operation? How common is this?
To me, it's not common, but you'd have to ask an emergency vet. And when I spoke with a representative of one of the emerge clinics, they were like, once a week, twice a week. So it's not uncommon. I guess that's the short answer to your question. I have done blood transfusions one time only in some of our patients, but that's a very long time ago for me.
Okay, so outside of this Winnipeg-based Canadian Animal Blood Bank, are there any other options?
Not right now. That's what's happening is Maritime is setting up their own operation. But obviously what happens is the blood is drawn from a dog and sent away for some processing and then comes back or is basically stored and sent out as needed. Blood's typically, for dogs, it's my understanding, it's typically good for about 28 to 30 days. Cat blood, there's a little bit of controversy about that, but say 28 to 30 days for that as well. The thing is, if someone wants to, and I'm just going to talk over for a second, if someone wants to have their dog considered for becoming a donor, basically it has to be a fully vaccinated, larger dog, over 50 plus pounds. They have to have some blood work done ahead to make sure that they're heartworm negative and no tick-borne diseases. And then they're typed. And without getting too deep into it, it's called DEA. It's an erythropoietin antigen or something. And it has to be a certain type better than others, though all dog blood can be used, at least initially. And then if you're really interested, if people are really interested, and I forgot about this till you guys contacted me, you have to basically, ideally, train your dog to, let its feet be touched, that it'll lay down on its side for a significant amount of time, that it doesn't mind being shaved, and that avoids the sedation and anesthesia that sometimes is necessary to take the blood.
Okay, so I guess when all is said and done, I guess when all is said and done, it doesn't seem as though it's an urgent need for blood. It's not as though there's a sense of urgency here, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, when you need it, you need it. That's the problem. So, for example, if a dog has autoimmune hemolytic anemia, which is basically a disease of the antibodies turn on its self-immunity, your immune system turns on to yourself and attacks your red blood cells. Sometimes you can get what's called hemoabdomen, and that's blood, from trauma, being hit by a car or a fall. Or I've read of it, though I personally haven't experienced it, thank goodness, of a spay gone wrong. The animal sent home and then there's blood leaking. I've had one case of that in my entire career, but we caught it so early, no blood products were needed. I read in preparation for this of splenectomy, blood being necessary for splenectomies. I have to say I've done splenectomies without blood being available, but obviously the animal's on IV fluids. And then it used to be when I was first in emergency practice, and we're talking 30 plus years ago, it was the rat poisons and things like that where we needed blood. And that's the times that I used blood transfusions in emergency practice. And, to reduce the complexity, because it is complex, most dogs can receive a one-time blood transfusion without being cross-matched. Because years ago, we didn't have the ability in private practice to do cross-matching. Nowadays, I don't have them in our practice, to be clear, but there are tests available for in-clinic blood cross-matching, at least initially, but the emerge clinics are all set up for that.
Okay, Jeff, appreciate it as always. Thanks so much.
Okay, you know what? We might talk about it again later in the month, and we'll talk about cats, because all we talked about today was dogs.
Okay,
so there you go.
Okay, sounds good, pal. Take care.
Cheers, friends.
All right,
Bye.
Dr. Jeff Goodall, veterinarian who runs the Sunnyview Animal Care Centre in Bedford. Retaliatory tariffs expected next week as Trudeau and premiers meet on Trump threats. We'll talk about all of this with Moshe Lander when we come back. Moshe Lander is an economist from Concordia University in Montreal. Moshe, thanks for joining the show, of course.
My pleasure.
All right, so lots and lots to get to. I think we'll start with Trump and tariffs and talk about retaliatory tariffs expected next week as Trudeau and the premiers meet on Trump threats. I guess, first of all, what can you tell us? Let's go kind of tariffs 101. For those who might not know exactly what a tariff is. I know that seems kind of rudimentary or elementary, but let's do that.
Not at all. Education begins with the basics.
That's right. So explain all things tariff for people.
Sure. So a tariff is nothing more than a tax on imports. So what Trump is threatening is that any good or service that Americans buy that's produced in Canada will have 25% tax added onto it. So the same way that we have GST or a provincial sales tax, they're saying they're going to add 25% in the form of an import tax. The logic is that it would raise the price for American consumers. And when the price of anything goes up, presumably you want to buy less of it. And so it would discourage Americans from buying Canadian stuff. It generates tax revenue for the American government. They can do with it as they please. And the thought then is that if Americans still want to get that product and they don't want to pay high Canadian prices, maybe this gives space then for American producers to increase the production of those goods that consumers are no longer buying from Canada. The damage, of course, to us is that we don't get any of that tariff revenue. All we get is reduced production, job losses, a recession, and all of the damage that comes from damaging our industries that rely on selling to Americans.
All right, so to scale up production in the United States, I would think that you can't turn that around on a dime. So might that force just Americans to be paying more, including businesses, for products from Canada for a period of time till they can scale up production?
Yeah, so American consumers should suffer in the form of higher prices. The issue will become, do Americans pay higher prices, or is America large enough that it can say, no, we're paying the same price. If anything, you Canadians have to sell the goods to us at a lower price so that when you add on the 25%, we're paying the same price as we were. In other words, then the tax revenue that the American government is going to generate is going to come out of Canadian business pockets.
Right. Yeah. And of course, then that impacts manufacturers, Canadian manufacturers, because they're getting 25% less.
Exactly. And so whether it's they just see their American consumers dry up because the Americans are paying the tax, or whether they see their business dry up because they're having to reduce the price that they sell for and therefore have to scale back production, the damage either way, or whether it's even a combo of those, means that it's just bad news across the board for Canadian producers, which is exactly what the Trump administration is trying to do. It's to lay low Canadian business, and that's why we're now hearing talk about using economic force to force some sort of unification of the two countries. He's saying, hey, listen, if you don't want it, then just join the U.S. and you're no longer subject to an import tax because you're now part of us.
Retaliatory tariffs. How much weight do we have? What type of leverage do we have here in Canada?
Not much. If we try to put a tariff on the U.S., the same story should apply, but now it's Canadians that are going to see their prices go up on all of the American goods and services that they buy. In this case, the ability to shovel some of that burden onto the Americans in saying to American producers, we're not paying higher prices, you reduce your price so that you can absorb the tax. That doesn't work. It works in the other direction because we are a small open economy. They're a large open economy. And so that power imbalance means that, no, that entire tariff is going to rebound back onto our consumers. It might save our producers a little bit, but this is compounding a bad strategy in the U.S. with a bad strategy in Canada. And the old adage that two wrongs make a right doesn't apply here. Two wrongs makes an even bigger wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So what when it comes to vehicle manufacturing, I've heard that the two industries are so intertwined, the American and Canadian car industry, that a car crosses on the continuum to get manufactured sometimes 8 or 9 times. Things can cross the border back and forth. What can you tell us about the connectivity of the economies and with some of these products, and why it might not make sense to have tariffs to 25%?
So any tariff does not make economic sense unless you have the capacity to shove the tariff onto the other country and make them pay for it. Remember Trump's old phrase of, I'm going to build a wall and I'm going to get Mexico to pay for it. If somehow the Americans could put a tariff on Canada and get Canadian businesses to pay the tariff revenue, then even the damage that's being done in the U.S. might be possibly offset by the money that they get from Canada. But that doesn't work in reverse. We don't have enough leverage to get the Americans to pay the tariffs that we're going to impose on them. So it universally weakens the well-being of society. For every winner that you find me, I'm going to find you a loser who's losing more than the winner is gaining. So it's bad for society overall. But trade wars are often not based on what's good economics. It's based on what's good politics. And so the best tariff is no tariff. If the fear is that this is going to damage Canadian industry, that's not his concern. The fact that it's going to harm American consumers is not his concern. He's trying to shore up a political base, or he's trying to make a political statement. And we've heard it combined with, I'm going to take Greenland, I'm going to take the Panama Canal. It seems that this is not being guided by economics, and his trade policy has never been guided by economics. It's always been driven by a distaste for trade that he's been consistent on for 4 decades. He's never been consistent on anything else, but this is the one topic that he seems to really have it in for.
But it's resonating with the American public right now. They're buying into this.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, his entire platform was "Make America Great Again." Now, Ronald Reagan used that to some success in the 1980s, using a similar sort of phrase. But what he's conjuring up in people's minds is that, the 21st century is strange, and it's uncomfortable, and it's changing so quickly, and it's making people feel nostalgic for a simpler time. And so the idea then is that if this is going to destroy Canadian industry, presumably the jobs will come back to America. And so American auto manufacturing, like you were mentioning earlier, where it's now crossing the border maybe 8 times, won't cross the border at all anymore because those Canadian auto jobs are just going to migrate to Tennessee or Alabama, where there's a lot of growth in the auto industry. And America will become great at making cars again. The unfortunate reality is that the reason why America doesn't make cars now the way it used to is because other countries do it better. And so even though it might bring back jobs, those gains will be offset by the losses of buying inefficiently made American cars, which nobody wanted to buy in a free trade world.
All right, so Trump talks about subsidizing Canada to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Is there any truth to that, do you think?
No, none at all. So it's not that they're subsidizing us. This is, again, playing loose with facts and misrepresenting things. We export and import. They export and import. And when you add up all of the exports and you subtract out all of the imports, what you get is what's called a trade balance. And so the trade balance, if it's positive, it's called a surplus. If it's negative, it's called a deficit. Generally speaking, we will have a trade surplus with the U.S. in some years and a trade deficit in others. And it's no different than you and I, Todd, being friends, that some months I might be lending you my chairs because you're hosting a party. And in some months you might be lending me food because I'm hosting a party. If we're good friends, these things tend to balance out over time. But at any given moment, one might be in hock to the other for these lendings that are going on. It's the same thing in Canada and the U.S. If we're exporting more to them than we're importing, then we're being a good neighbor. But there's going to be periods where we're importing more from them than they're exporting from us. Right now, the U.S. is taking more of our stuff than they're giving back. We're friendly about that, saying it all balances out in the end. But right now, he takes exception to the idea that they are getting more from us than they're giving back. And so that's what he's calling then, that they're subsidizing us. It's not a subsidy at all. It's that they're buying goods from us and we're buying goods from them, and sometimes these don't balance out.
All right, so the government's response to this, outside of, I guess, retaliatory tariffs, what else can we do? Disseminate information into the United States and let people know, educate them about all of these things? Or what strategically should we or could we be doing as a government?
Yeah, so a very good advertising campaign to explain just the basics of trade, like we just did here in the last 10 minutes. Yeah. You don't have to make it a 10-minute public service announcement, but you got to explain to American consumers, not the politicians. They understand this stuff privately. Publicly, though, they're not going to understand it, or privately, they're going to say, we totally get this, but publicly, they're going to say, Canada is getting subsidized, or they're cheat sneaks, whatever. But the other thing, of course, is that Canada needs to realize that we are excessively reliant on the U.S. because we've really never pursued free trade agreements to the same degree that we have with the Americans. So we need to diversify our trade partners and look a lot closer at Europe, a lot closer at Asia. And we need voices in Canada that are going to push for a liberal trade agenda, liberal small L, not capital L. And that needs to be done quickly and, cross party lines here. It can't be something that becomes politicized. We've realized that over-reliance on the U.S. is okay as long as we're both ideologically in the same general part of the distribution. But when those two parts deviate, we're realizing this might not be the best partnership out there.
All right. What do your instincts tell you? Do you feel as though January 20th that Trump will sign this executive order and these tariffs will become reality?
Whether it's January 20, 21, 22, whatever, yeah, before the end of the month, we're going to see these tariffs. There's no way that he's going to back down from it. He can't at this point. He's made so much hash of calling us the 51st state, talking about using economic force, insulting the prime minister. He's insulted Canadians in the past. He doesn't like trade. There's just no way that he's not going to put these tariffs in place. I think the real issue then is how long is this going to last? Is this going to go until an election is forced in this country and we have a new government, or is it going to continue into 2026 when we have to review the free trade agreement between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico? And is he going to use these tariffs as a leverage point to say, all right, now I want changes to this free trade agreement, and that's the thing that's going to get rid of these tariffs. You give me what I want, or you can continue to suffer.
And just quickly, what industries will be hit the hardest and the quickest here in Canada with this?
So as far as exports go, all of the big manufacturing, agricultural, natural resources, it's going to go province to province. There's no one that's going to be spared. And on the consumer side, it's anything that we're importing. While we're not necessarily going to have the retaliatory tariffs in place, we are going to see that the Canadian dollar continues to remain weak. And so any food, for example, fruits, vegetables, stuff that we're importing because of seasonality, those things are going to jump up in price because they're priced in American dollars. And with the weak Canadian dollar, it just means more in Canadian dollar terms.
Well, very interesting, Moshe. Thanks so much for your insight. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right, take care. Moshe Lander, economist with Concordia University in Montreal. So that's quite sobering, that chat. Moshe says, look, it's happening. And you can imagine what impact this will have on countless jobs. I think I heard something like 250,000 jobs potentially impacted in the short term. And then who knows what happens long term. So what's your take on all of this? Do you think that that the government, our Canadian government, could do more? But retaliatory tariffs, is that going to get it done? Moshe Lander doesn't think so. How far do we go with this? What are your thoughts on Donald Trump and his threats to take over Canada, I guess, through economic means? Not military might, but economic means. Is he serious? And does the government, our government, which is on its knees right now, politically, we know that, have what it takes to deal with this situation? That or anything else you want to talk about? 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Is Donald Trump completely unhinged? Or do you think that he's working in the best interest of his country? Some people called the show yesterday and liked what he's doing and what he's saying. Surprisingly. But nonetheless, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back.
Facts.
All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. What is on your mind today? Again, a lot of people talking about, and rightfully so, what's happening as of January 20th with the inauguration of Donald Trump, and how can we react? How should we react to these threats? And we would say that the threats, look, I talked to Moshe Lander just previous to this, to the newscast with Concordia University, and he says he thinks that this is a done deal, that he's going to impose these tariffs. And it's really, really sobering. It truly is, to see what's happening. It's hard to believe what's happening. It's hard to believe that we've got a president-elect who is talking about annexing Greenland and the Panama Canal and through economic means, bringing us to our knees in order to make it seem attractive enough to join the United States willingly. I mean, this is bizarro world stuff, folks, in my opinion. Melanie Joly, the foreign affairs minister, and we can assume is going to be running for the liberal leadership, although she's remaining coy about it right now, and that's just tactics. We get that. That's fair game, I suppose. Says that we should not take the bait. What's that even mean, take the bait? Does that mean that we don't take him seriously or we do take him seriously? You can't, it's one or the other. Either we believe he's going to do this and a government and as a provincial governments and a unified front, we do something about it, whatever that is. I mean, you might as well deal with reality and play the best card you can. That's all you can do. I think at this point we have to assume he's serious. So what are your thoughts on all of this, folks? 902-405-6000. Clark, hello.
Oh, hey there, Todd. Good morning.
Good morning.
I just wanted to comment. I mean, I wasn't listening to the show yesterday or anything, but, I mean, when you hear people listening to Trump and actually Canadians being supportive of what he's saying and threatening literal attacks on Canada, either economically or literally militarily, I think is a definite possibility. I mean, I think it speaks a lot to how people are hurting in this economic environment. I think that ties into how little support our federal government has, how intimate partner violence is becoming very, very prevalent right now. I think all of it tied to how people are hurting right now. And I think, I mean, leadership does need to change, and I think people are looking at our own political parties and not seeing solutions, and they're seeing Trump flipping government on his head and just wishing we could do something similar. Unfortunately, I think not that we should do anything remotely close to that, but people need help. Clearly, it seems to me, because all these issues are tied. But when it comes to Trump, I think he needs to be taken 100% seriously. I understand, even though people might be hurting, they need to understand that Trump is not here for us. He is here for not even Americans. He's there for himself.
Yeah.
So when he talks about Greenland or the Arctic, that is 100% whoever has, his ear on a given day is asking him to go after it and, drill baby drill kind of thing. And that's, something that's a direct attack on Canada. And so I don't think any Canadian should ever be supportive of it.
So what response, Clark, should we take here, do you think?
He needs to be taken 100% seriously. And we did it last time. He's complaining now about the very trade deal he negotiated that apparently we're owning him on. So, do it again. It's got to be a whole government response that I think they're doing currently. They're calling premiers. They're going to Ottawa, and they're putting a solution together. And I think even, political parties are going to be coming together through all of this. It's definitely complicated with, no leadership now, essentially. In the Liberal Party and a prime minister. But who knows how that's going to impact the leadership race and who's running our country in 3 months. But in any case, I think, nothing like a common enemy to bring everyone together.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Thanks, Clark. Take care. 902-405-6000. Mike, hello.
Hey, Todd.
Hi there.
I think we got to take lunatic definitely serious, but he's an opportunist. Like, first he said he was going to bring these tariffs in if we didn't secure our borders better, and we scrambled to do everything he said, and now it's like, oh no, I'm bringing the tariffs in unless you become Americans. And I think it's the art of the game, though, is he's what's going to happen. He's going to settle for Alberta, and Alberta, given the chance, would go hands down. If they were given a referendum tomorrow, they would go hands down tomorrow.
Well, I don't know about that, but probably the appetite would be a little more.
I've worked there for years, and they think that everyone else in Canada is living off them. They think Atlantic Canada, we're all living off a check. Like, we don't even work down here. I've heard them say it right from their mouth. Like, they believe they should be Americans, and really that's what Trump wants, is oil.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess your message is what? What's your key takeaway then?
I think that's what his game is. He's saying he wants Canada, and he will settle for if we say, okay, well, Alberta will go, and give him the chance to have Alberta and possibly Saskatchewan, he would say, okay, I'll take these two, and the rest of Canada can. He's like just trying to scare us into getting what he wants.
Yeah. So economic measures through tariffs and kind of bringing us to our knees, that's a form of warfare, in my opinion. Well, it is a form of warfare.
It sure is. It's economical warfare. And he knows he can do it, and he knows really we can shut down every export we have, and it's not really going to hurt them. Yeah. Scary stuff, eh? It is, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000. David, hello.
Hi, Todd. Sorry, just take you off speaker there.
Sure.
Yeah, what's there? I just wanted to sort of draw the parallels between, Putin and Ukraine and sort of Trump's stance on Canada and maybe sort of what that augurs for Ukraine. So, Trump's obviously okay with sort of a more powerful nation pursuing sort of territorial annexation of a means of aggrandizing itself. And, he's taken a similar position towards Canada. So, in upcoming negotiations with Ukraine, how much can we really expect him to sort of, defend his interests and stuff like that? But I guess as far as Canada goes, we should maybe consider sort of purchasing the majority of our military equipment from a neighbor who's threatening us with, territorial annexation. So, what are we spending? About $100 billion on F-35 fighter jets? As I understand it, the UK and Japan have signed an agreement to develop a sort of next generation fighter. Well, we should probably look at sort of getting on board with them. I mean, the Japanese and Brits build, good stuff. I guess the sort of NATO training base in, I think it's northern Alberta or something like that, is currently shuttered. Well, we should, sort of look at renewing our agreements with Britain and sort of other NATO countries and reestablishing some overseas contingents here and, training and stuff like that. But it's also Sweden and Finland. I mean, they build very good naval, military equipment, ships, submarines, and stuff like that. Some of the best in the world. So, I mean, they also have their Griffin fighter jets, which I think we should have purchased. But, so we should look at pursuing sort of arms agreements with those nations, maybe trade deals, bringing some production over here and stuff like that. So,
yeah, all that, look, perhaps are good ideas, but in the here and now, we've got something pretty pressing coming up in just a number of days now, about 11 days, and that's potentially tariffs, which would be devastating. And according to Moshe Lander, he thinks that this is going to happen. It's a done deal. So we have to respond in the here and now as well, David, right?
Yeah, no, that's it. But I mean, I think this is sort of also what Trump doesn't realize, that there's long-term consequences associated with this. He's not even in office yet, and him and Musk are sort of basically alienated, they're sort of most important allies and stuff. So, I mean, those would be some of the long-term things. But I guess the other thing to remember, that yes, in terms of our trade with the United States, we're relatively small, but for like a number of the bordering states and other sort of important areas, probably even like New York as well too, that, trade with Canada is actually a significant part of their economy. I mean, unlike Russia, Trump doesn't control the media, he doesn't control the courts, there's a vibrant opposition, so it's sort of, you can expect that there are a lot of people in the United States sort of speaking out against this, and it's sort of, it's how the rest of the world sees it. Like, to him, it might make him sound great and grand and all that stuff, but, I think a lot of other people are shaking their heads and thinking, what a, butthead kind of thing. Yeah. And so, I mean, yeah, in the short here and now, like I've dealt with similar situations domestically, living in an apartment building, and or if you got like a rampaging child or something. I mean, yeah, it's a very difficult situation, because what do you use? Strength and power, and it just exacerbates the situation. But I think the thing is just to be an adult. Stand back, it's going to cause some short-term pain, and that's unfortunate because we got bigger problems to deal with, and why are we now handling this mess? But just sit back and wait. It's all going to implode sooner or later.
Okay, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. Continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Dan, hello.
How you doing this morning, Todd?
Well, you?
Not bad, brother. Let me quote you some statistics to try and assuage some of people's fears about this guy who's just full of bravado. 60% of the crude oil that the United States imported last year, they bought from Canada. 100% of the natural gas that they import comes from Canada. 90% of their electricity that the United States buys comes from Canada. We're the largest supplier of uranium to the United States. Mm-hmm. So to bring us to our knees, they'd have to bring their own economy to its knees. We're too intertwined. We're mm-hmm. connected. So It's bravado. Like Mike said, he's just trying to. I find he's like a petulant little child. He's just pushing and prodding to see who's going to say what, who's going to do what can he get away with. Yeah. Already there's been a poll that showed, I think, 12 or 13% of Canadians would be happy to become Americans, and he's loving this. Can we get that number up to 50? He's mm-hmm. thinking. Yeah. Yes, he's totally serious about wanting to annex Canada and take us over and make us the 51st state. But we have to be willing participants in that. And if we're not, then he can't, and that's where it starts. Yeah. Well,
when it comes to being when it comes to being willing participants, I suppose the theory is if you impose enough economic strife on a country and on people, then you'll bring them to their knees, and they'll eventually capitulate. That's a pretty sad commentary when that's the strategy from the president-elect. That's a pretty damn sad commentary, isn't it?
It's 100% if you're looking at it from the office from which he's been elected to. Yeah. But it's Donald Trump. I remember when he was elected in 2016, I swear to God, Todd, I remember the first 30 seconds I heard, I was like, seriously, the apprentice guy's now the president of the United States? I made the prediction, and I'm not even telling a lie. I said, this is only going to end one of two ways. He's either going to be impeached or assassinated because of his character. He lies and BS's and sexually assaults and does all this crooked stuff, and they reelect him, right? The sad part to me of that poll that they took was that there's 12% of Canadians that are just as stupid as all the Americans that voted him in. I think a week with him being elected, he was on 60 Minutes, and he had been asked about the grocery thing, because that was one of his election promises. I'm going to bring the cost of living down, the cost of groceries down. He just said, yeah, once the prices are up, it's almost impossible to bring them down.
Yeah.
Totally negating the promise that he had made that a lot of people voted for him based upon. So he just lies and lies and lies some more. But there's no way he can bring all these sanctions against us, 25% tariff across the board, without tanking his own economy. And this is another prediction I'll make, and I know this is going to be 100% true. If we can survive the next 2 years of his tariffs, if he's willing to sabotage his own economy to try and get us to become the 51st state, he's going to lose the House and the Senate in 2 years in the midterms. Sadly, he's got a 4-year mandate to be president, but he'll lose the House and the Senate. That's it. If we can make it through the next 2 years, to be weak-kneed and go, oh well, like what are you going to do? You're going to become the 51st state so we don't have 25% tariffs? Yeah. Of course not. So we have to stand up to it, suck it up, start to manufacture more things internally, and that's all we can do. I mean, we can't control that Donald Trump is a narcissist. He's extremely insecure. He's got a huge ego, and he's a fascist. He wants to be a dictator. He's already tried to put all this crazy cabinet appointments through by recess appointments. He's going to recess the Senate, keep them in recess, and then sneak all these crazy, unfit people into cabinet, which are just going to be more Donald Trump sycophants. What you say is what you get. Whatever you say, Don. Yeah. And these are his steps into becoming a dictator. I mean, why do you think he had Viktor Orban to Mar-a-Lago to play golf? Yeah. He asked him, how did you take Hungary from a democracy to a dictatorship? And I'm sure Victor was more than happy to lay it out for him. You do this, you do this, you alienate, you get people to distrust the government, distrust the press. This is stuff he's been doing for years now. Has his way, he will be a dictator, but it doesn't mean we have to say, yeah, please take us in as the 51st state. Economic sanctions notwithstanding, Todd, he's going to have to tank his own economy to tank ours.
Wow.
And how do you think the American people are going to stand?
Yeah, well, but like you said, it's going to take some time, though, for it to filter through and to start manifesting itself into Americans' lives, and only then. But can we survive for 2 years? And I suppose that's the how far do we go when it comes to retaliation? Do we do it? Do we do what Premier Ford suggests, or does he do what they're saying and cut power to the United States? Danielle Smith in Alberta says she has no interest in cutting oil exports into the United States. So
why would she? She makes a huge amount of money every year off the sale of it.
Yeah.
Of course she's not going to want to cut that off.
Yeah, exactly.
She's chopping off her nose to spite her face.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with Doug Ford. He shuts off the power because Ontario supplies most of the electricity that the states buy. But if he does that, then where's all that revenue that he's been bringing in to run the government?
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Well, we can't. He can say what he wants. And I mean, the thing is that I think everybody should try to do is take a breath, take a step back, and realize who's saying all these things. This is Donald Trump. He constantly and continuously lies about everything. Someone says, well, how do you know he's lying? It's an old cliche, but it's like his lips are moving. Yeah. So, of course his intent is for real. Don't anybody confuse that. He's just kind of playing around. He started it as a joke to test the waters. Mm-hmm. He's hearing about these polls that maybe 10 or 12% of Canadians might be up for this, and he's pushing. Well, this and that, and well, this tariff. He went like one of the other guys said, the tariffs were based on a couple quick statistics. So he lumped us in with Mexico. He says, well, you guys have to stop fentanyl from coming in from Canada and immigration like Mexico does. In 2023, the border service agencies seized less than 20 kilos of fentanyl coming from Canada into the U.S. The same year, they seized a little under 10 tons of fentanyl coming from Mexico. In 2023, the U.S. Border Services interdicted and stopped approximately 30,000 illegal immigrants trying to get into the States. From Mexico the same year, 600,000. So we're not even comparable, but he lumps us in with Mexico. And if you don't both shore up your borders, and as one of the other callers said, we've done everything we could. $1.2 billion we're going to spend. And now he's like, well, I want you to be the 51st state kind of thing, or we're going to tariff anyway. This is going to happen if he's willing to give up the House and the Senate. But I think he is, because he's all about him. All these guys that are in the Republican Party that are like, yes, Donald, wherever you say Donald, he would throw them out the window in a minute if it could save him or further his agenda. Yeah. So the tariffs may come, but it's going to tank the North American economy, and that will spill over into the world.
Okay, Dan, appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
All right, take care. Greg, hello.
How you doing, Todd?
Well, you?
It's interesting. Like I said, but the bottom thing that I look at is that he was elected Donald Trump a landslide victory, okay, because people in the States bought what he was selling. And, the thing in the matter is, I look at, and I told somebody else the other day, is that he's there to protect the interests of the United States of America and the American people, not Canada and not Mexico. And I think that's the thing that we have to look at. Now, we may not agree what he says, what he's going to do, but at the end of the day, he's there sticking up for the citizens of the U.S. And whether we like it or not, but I really don't think it's going to come to what he said it's going to be. Maybe it might be, and this thing about becoming the 51st state, well, I think that's just a lot of hot air, take it with a grain of salt type of thing. That's not going to happen anyway. But the thing is, we have to realize, and then you talk about the defense. Well, we have a neighbor to the south that takes care of us, the Americans, right? But here's the other thing: Canada has not put 2% of their gross domestic product into defense. They haven't done that for how many years now? And because we rely on the Americans being here to take care of us.
Yes.
Well, we got to start. We may not like the tariff stuff, but we got to start taking care of our own parts here. Spend money on defense like you're supposed to do, right? That might ease a few things. You know what I mean? And these tariffs, well, I really don't think it's going to come to that. Maybe not, because again, you're not going to want to harm your own economy or somebody else's. But it got Canada's attention, is what I'm saying. Okay, people have taken notice what he said. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's got to be something. And I think down the line, maybe in another year or so, maybe these things might blow over a bit. Maybe not. Maybe so. Who knows? But again, it's caught Canadians' attention very fast. And I think, we have to start taking this guy seriously. He's there to take care of the U.S., not Canada or Mexico.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that he's there to, in some altruistic way, to take care of American citizens as much as his own agenda and his own delusion is at play here. Like, let's not say that. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's accurate to suggest that Donald Trump is doing this in the best interest of residents of the United States. I really don't.
But look at this. But but look at this though. But they voted for him.
Yeah.
Landslide victory. So obviously they bought what he was selling. Is what I'm telling you.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be the first time. It wouldn't be the first time populations have bought into what politicians have sold them.
Come on, up here too. Yes, God, we're not new to it. Yeah, you're right. But again, like you say, it's I think they were kind of fed up with Biden and Kamala Harris and the Democrats. And the Democrats, nobody's buying what they're selling anymore. Yeah. They have to change their narrative if they want to get back into power again.
That's true. Okay, Greg.
See what I mean? So,
yep. Okay, got a boogie.
Take care, my friend.
Thanks, pal. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. Continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Hello, buddy.
How you doing, Todd? Glad to hear you back on the air.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, you're sounding good. Okay, in regards to this all, as far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump is a super salesman. He deals with Dale Carnegie. In Dale Carnegie's book, The Power of Positive Thinking, there's a line that says, if you can learn to turn on the motors of other people, you can be anything you want to be in life. Well, this is all that man has been doing for years now. Goes around turning on motors, whether it be good or whether it be bad. He's in the spotlight, and that's where he loves to be.
Yeah, like I agree with you. I've often said that I don't think he's all that concerned about what people are saying about him as long as they are talking about him, period.
You're right about that, brother.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the way he is, that's the way he lives, and that's the way he made his money.
Yeah. Okay, buddy.
Also, while I get you on the air, I want to say, our governments around here are pretty crazy. When I was about 4 years old, I used to run around the house hearing my old man saying they are nothing but glorified gangsters. I didn't even know what he was talking about. Well, today I do. Mm-hmm. They are definitely glorified gangsters. And we got Hitler next in our other side of our border, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, I'm not a fan of Hitler comparisons, to be honest with you. I think that's something that I don't think is productive. But anyway, thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Tony, hello.
Hello, Todd. Yesterday, my wife said, call Todd and tell him that you told him so weeks ago. Well, okay, that's the end of that discussion. That's the end of that discussion, Todd.
Yeah.
But the bottom line here is Trump's nothing but a predator. He's for real. Something is going to happen, but there are backstops yet that Canadian people don't realize. One, he can't do this arbitrarily. He either has to go to Congress or he has to declare an emergency, and Congress has to, in fact, back that up. I don't know if that'll happen. I certainly think it will. He owns both houses. Mm-hmm. The bottom line here, look at what he's doing. He's after Greenland. He's after Panama. Now, last night, I believe he came out with something new. Did you know that last night at the president's lying in state, his cadre went and made a scene, or a showing, I don't want to say a scene, a showing, after which they adjourned to an adjacent room, and a discussion with somebody in the know, one of the smart people there that's there, said that the discussion was specifically annexation of Canada, whether it be economically or by other means is the word he used. The guy's real. Yeah. This guy, I told you, this guy is real. If it comes out of his mouth, he's thinking about it. Mm-hmm. I want you the Canadian people have to look past this a little bit as well. Leon Muscapone is doing his very best to turn all of the major European countries to the far right, particularly Germany. And I know you just told a gentleman you didn't like his word, but there is a party that is extremely far right that the Germans have equated with the Nazi regimes, or at least the actions they took back prior to World War II. He's meddled in Britain. He's meddled in France, and everything's far right. So he's handling the out of the country stuff, and Trump is handling the in country stuff. And Trump, I mean, what are you going to do? Canada right now, and I'm going to tell you what I did yesterday, and I told Vanessa. Yeah. I took my American flag down. Whoa. Rach and I have lived in this house 30 years, a little more than 30 years, and we always had two flags flying side by side, the Canadian flag and the American flag. Not because I'm afraid of what might happen or there might be repercussions. My neighbor has an American flag and a Canadian flag, too, two big ones. Mm-hmm. I had two small ones on stanchions. I'm not ashamed. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed by this guy. And people who said he had a landslide victory. He didn't have a landslide victory. He had a landslide victory in the electoral college. Mm-hmm. But he only won by 1% of the vote, Todd. 1% of the vote is what he won by. You can check it. You had a man on, by the way, earlier that was giving you numbers. Those numbers are kind of weak. I don't believe that the United States gets 90% of its electricity from Canada.
No, he didn't say that. He said what's imported comes from. So obviously they produce a lot of their own electricity. But he said what's imported.
He said that Canada provided 90% of it.
No, I thought he said what my takeaway was what they're importing. 90% comes from Canada. So
I'm going to go back and listen to it, Todd, because you're probably right. But I was trying to pay attention. I love those numbers, as you know.
Yeah.
Canada, you said it yesterday, I believe, is rudderless at the moment. I don't see anything happening here that's going to improve that situation before the predator gets to be the president. And Canada's got to get its political mess in order. People are afraid of Palliative. Okay, you're afraid of them. Give me an alternative. I mean, give me an NDP alternative. Give me a liberal alternative. These are your people, not mine. I don't know them. You tell me somebody that you really believe can stand up and talk to Trump on his level. Can Palliative do it? I don't know, but the Canadian people seem to have, at this point, anybody but Trudeau, I believe, is what the situation is in your election here. But the bottom line is, who's going to stand up against him? Yeah. Give me one name, Todd. Can you give me one name off the top of your head? Really, I'm asking sincerely here.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what qualifies as standing up to? That's the question. That how do you stand up to and stand up? I just don't know if bravado gets it done. I don't know how to approach this, and that's the challenge, right?
Well, you know, when I told you the minute that the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister or whatever he is now, went to Mar-a-Lago, that he was dead meat.
Yeah.
That Canada was dead meat. If you recall that, I told you.
Yeah.
You made a bad mistake. And now that mistake is coming to fruition. And I don't like seeing it, and I don't like my country being part of it. But he is in, and there's nothing any of us are going to do about it. I didn't vote for him. I'm not proud of that. I voted for Harris as the lesser of two evils. That's what I voted, and I hate doing that. But the bottom line is, he's there. You got to come up with your best candidate. If you're going to go with another Liberal government, I'll tell you what, Canada might as well take its border protection down. Right now, I'll tell you, he'll just walk across the border. I'm sure of it. I'm positive of it.
Okay, Tony. Appreciate the call. Take care.
I'm sorry about the bad news, but that's the story.
Okay.
Have a great day,
Thanks.
Todd.
Okay, 902-405-6000. Jim, hello.
How you doing, Todd?
I'm well, you?
Good, thank you. Listen, I'll start off with a cynical comment. I've told you many times I wouldn't get into the Trump politics, but boy, when he assaults me as a Canadian, I'm sorry, Todd, I can't help myself. Anyway, I hope there's a lot of Canadians that feel the same way. You know, the War of 1812, the Americans tried to take us in Canada. They failed. We ended up burning down the White House again. I like to be able to sit across from Trump and say, you know, it can happen again, buddy. But that's being cynical, okay? My first reaction, and other friends of mine and family, is that you know, they watch the news and you get ideas from it. But watching Trump, he's definitely an expansionist president. You know, as Biden was a nationalist guy. Biden didn't help us economically very much, but he didn't threaten to invade us economically or militarily. But I've been on this earth long enough to know what starts wars, and what starts wars is the economic situation in nations and also expansionism. The United States, Americans are well known for their expansionist attitudes. So I think that Trump wants to make a name for himself, bring it to the attention of Canada and Panama and whoever, Greenland, and who knows where else. The Americans didn't want to get involved in the European War and the Second World War. Roosevelt had to convince him of that, and finally Pearl Harbor came. So the Americans aren't great to go to Europe or anywhere, you know, for wars. But they're such a big nation, you know, they always get involved in it because of their ideology. But having said that, what can Canadians do? When I sit and watch the TV, and you'll have to tell me if this is true, still the case, is the Premier of Alberta still going to the inauguration of Donald Trump after this?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if she is or not.
The last I heard, she was. I don't like to make assumptions, but let's assume that she is. Here's the Premier of Alberta, and the West and the East Coast, like us, we haven't always got along, but she's going down there to that inauguration after a president has threatened to take over Canada, or basically economically. He said he wouldn't militarily. I wouldn't hold him to that.
Yeah.
But having a Premier of Alberta, one of our biggest provinces, to go to inauguration after a president that's going to be there in a week and a half, to threaten to try to take over this country, where is that coming from, Todd?
Yeah.
Where's that coming from? That is not unification. You know, that is not Canadians sticking together. And you know, we've had our own, twice now I've lived through separatist motions to separate Canada. We got through that. So I think, if anything I can say as a Canadian is Mike himself. I know Mike, I guess Mike's your caller. He has a dual citizenship. So I'm sure Mike is upset about this. I wish he was ashamed more than embarrassed of Trump. But unfortunately, I can see Trump doing that. But what I'll be looking for, Todd, is his first State of the Union address in January, and or whenever that comes. I think it's always in January. And if the Senate and if the Congress basically support him throughout that process when he gets in, I think he's going to put the tariffs in the first day in the office, like he says he's going to do. He's always been a tariff guy. He loves tariffs. So, yeah, we've got a big problem on our hands. How do we deal with it? We just stand tall. Canadians call your show. They speak up. They write their member of parliament. They do whatever we can. But there's no way the United States is not going to create. If he keeps this up, I'll predict that there will be, unfortunately, a backlash, which scares the hell out of me, against Americans by Canadians. What do you think?
Well, it's possible. And look, I think right now people are it's talking points until it affects people's lives economically. It doesn't become real, right? I've often said that once something actually impacts you directly, then it becomes real. And once it starts to trickle down into the economy and manifest itself into our economy, and our revenues start becoming sluggish, and the federal government stops getting as much money because of exports, whatever it is, then it will become serious, Jim. I think that until it actually happens and people start seeing the impacts and people start getting laid off, and we start losing jobs and we start losing revenue, and that filters through the economy, I don't think people will take it seriously until it impacts their life.
Yeah, well, I'm taking it seriously. I can tell you that you're hitting the mark right on. If he does this, which I think he will, it's going to be extremely destructive to us.
Yeah.
We are going to suffer like we've never suffered before.
Yeah, and he doesn't care. Trump doesn't care that we're going to suffer. His attitude is, why? I don't care about Canada. I care about the United States, and I care about U.S. citizens. And we're getting and this is resonating and has resonated with Americans.
Yeah, and Trump was elected by. Nobody's ever done what he's done before. Anyway, as far as modern times, I mean, he's got a big mandate from the American people, and that's what upsets me. But that's their country; they decided to vote for him. So I don't just focus on Trump. He's got a Senate and he's got a Congress. And if the American people don't stand up and say, "What do you mean you're going to try to take over Canada, our closest ally? Are you crazy?" If I don't hear a backlash down there, we've got bigger problems, Todd.
Yeah.
Bigger problems.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate the call.
Take care, buddy.
Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Bernie, hello.
Yeah, good morning, Todd.
Good morning.
Interesting times, eh?
Indeed.
Yeah, well, I remember after the Second World War, Eisenhower say, "God help us if the military-industrial complex ever takes over." Well, that's what you got in the States now, a military-industrial complex. Tommy Douglas said when this country was fighting crisis and people were going around wondering what they're going to do, this is not the day for sunshine soldiers and fair weather friends. This threat is real to Canada, and the people got to have the backbone to set up. If we suffer under the tariffs, we suffer under the tariffs, but we never give up our country to the south of the border. And so all the people can do, you never know what can happen. Donald Trump is 78 years old. He could go out with a stroke or a heart attack, and so there's always hope that something can happen. But he is a real threat, and the people put him there. The evangelists put him there. And in Canada here, you had a lot of people that were from on your program supporting Donald Trump coming to power. So now they got the real threat, the elephant in the room, and it's Donald Trump. And the people better take him very serious.
Okay, Bernie, thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Let's see here. Eric, hello.
Todd, how you doing, man?
I'm well. You?
Your voice is good.
Thanks a lot.
I'm not doing too bad. Listen, I was listening to Kevin O'Leary, and he's propagating an economic North American Union, such as they have in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at what happened in Europe, when they made the economic union, Holland didn't take over Belgium, Germany didn't take over France. I think that he might be headed in that direction, wanting an economic union. I think that he's right about controlling migrants that we don't know anything about and all the problems that people have discussed. Honestly, Todd, I think we'd be better off with the North American Union, much better than being under the auspices of the World Trade Organization. I think our country would benefit much better from that. And I'm not going to take up much of your time, but it'd be interesting for you to watch Kevin O'Leary's interview. You can find it on YouTube. the other thing is, I'm not losing much sleep about, I say this with tongue in cheek. I'm not worrying about the 181st Airborne landing on the Commons or the USS Eisenhower pulling in Halifax Harbor and sending an expeditionary force of Marines to. I think all that kind of stuff is just foolish talk. I think he's correct about securing the border. I don't think he wants to annex Canada, but I think he wants some type of economic union that could benefit both countries, and not be subjected to the World Trade Organization. I don't have much more to say than that, but people are just, you said it a while ago. Don't speculate and anticipate something's going to happen until it actually does happen.
Well, no, I didn't say that. I didn't say that earlier. I think you have to plan and anticipate that this is going to happen. I don't think we can just sit back and wait till it happens. I think we need to be. I think we need to be proactive. Do we not?
Well, yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, you were in the military. You learned that you're ready for all anything that could happen. So yeah. I guess I misinterpreted that. But we just need to chill a little bit. And see what happens. Be prepared. But did you hear that Canadians offered to buy Alaska? And I heard that set Mr. Trump back on his heels a bit. So that's interesting in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's all I got to say, Todd. Maybe just chill. Find out what Peter Navarro. I mean, he's a very astute man. He did a lot for the American economy when he was in the administration before. I really don't think they want to take over Canada in terms of running the country. I think they just want to have some type of economic union. I could be totally wrong. Who knows?
Okay, Eric.
You have a good day.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate the call. Jamie, hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm well. You?
Not too bad, thanks. I just wanted to call in about. Pardon me, I'm just getting a couple things down here. Call in about this situation with Donald Trump and the border, right? I mean, come on, people. What's the downside, right? What's the downside? Joining the most technologically advanced, militarily powerful, largest resource abundant place on Earth. What's the
downside to having a company cripple us economically and take us by economic force? What's the downside to that?
Well,
are you serious?
What is it? You lay it out.
Well, the downside would be upheaval to the. Why don't you move there then? If it's so wonderful, Jamie, why don't you move there?
I'm perfectly happy here. I'm not moving anywhere.
Well, yeah,
right?
yeah.
But at the same time, being separate from those guys, there's lots of downsides. We can have idiots in charge, and I believe a lot of people think that Donald Trump is an idiot. Donald Trump is a thinker that this is my belief, is that most people can't think that big. Who in the name of God thinks of joining all of North America together along with Greenland? Who thinks of this? And even
wow, you really think that he's a big thinker? I mean, this is something that he quipped about, and it was a joke, and he admitted it was a joke, and then he realized that it was getting traction, so he continued to fan the flames. I mean, this is a rabble rouser. This is not a big thinker.
Thinking that he's a joke is a joke. Why don't you compare bank accounts with him? Why don't you compare what you've done?
I see. So if somebody's whatever. Okay, so if somebody's filthy rich, that means they're a great person. Is that what you're saying? Oh, he's so rich, so he's a great person. I should feel inferior to him because he's rich, supposedly. Wow, if being rich is the barometer of being a good person, and then we're seriously misguided. I don't know. Look, be careful what you wish for, folks. That's all I say. Be careful what you wish for. Anyway, thanks for the calls, everybody. Didn't get to all of you. For that, I apologize. I don't mind having opposing points of view, by the way, but we have to have some level of sensibility when it comes to this whole thing, in my opinion. We're going to talk about the politics behind all this with Don Desserud. We'll be back.
Thanks.
Don Desserud, UPEI political science professor, joins us for a conversation. Don, thanks for joining the show.
You're very welcome, Todd. Always glad to be here.
All right, so where to start? I suppose we'll start with what's happening in response to, or what the response should be to Donald Trump. Cabinet ministers say they must not overreact to these threats. Melanie Joly says, don't take the bait. This has got to be one of the most troubling, challenging issues to ever face a government, I would think. How to handle this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you go back all the way to Confederation and the post-Civil War years, where the United States was coveting Canada then, and we were looking to Britain as our safeguard, and they were disinterested. So it was touch and go then as well. But that's how long ago it takes. I don't know whether to take it seriously. I frankly don't, though. I will listen to other people who know more about these relationships than I do. Mainly because Trump has shown himself to be so unpredictable. It's almost anything goes, and I guess that's what they're saying. My take on it, and I'll point out that I don't pretend to be an expert on American politics, but my take on it is that what Trump likes to do is see the reaction to outrageous statements, and that gives him a sense of power because everybody's paying attention to him now. It may even be that he's also trying to distract, which he has lots of things that he wants to distract people from. But what I find fascinating is what happens is this: he'll make an outrageous statement, then people will then try to figure out, and by people I mean analysts like myself, will try to figure out what possible sense there could be in that statement. Eventually, someone will come up with something that seems to be a strategy. And then that will be the strategy that is attached to it. We'll say, okay, that's what he meant all along. I don't think that's the case. I don't think he has any idea of what to do next. I think he just waits for people to figure it out for him, and then sits back and says, yeah, that's what I meant all along as well. But I do appreciate that if you're a cabinet minister in Canada right now, you can't just ignore this stuff.
All right, so don't ignore it. But so what I guess would be the approach then?
I don't know. If I did, I'd have a different kind of job. That's a huge one. But frankly, and I say this more as an intuitive response as opposed to an analysis. It seems to me that people like Doug Ford are the ones that have the right idea. You don't want to cut your nose off to spite your face. It's one. If you say if you're going to cut off exports to the United States, well, that's going to hurt the manufacturers and producers here as well. But Ford's response of taking a tough line is, I think, the one that the Canadian public would like to see more of from our leaders. And I do see a change in tone from the Liberals anyway, and Jagmeet Singh as well with the NDP. Poilievre's comments so far have been a bit weaker, like he's talking about in the abstract as opposed to saying to Trump, no, this is not on the table at all, and lay off. He's talking about it abstractly, and I don't think that's going to resonate with the public. But again, the public wants to see that there's a strong leader who's willing to put his foot down and say enough's enough. It's like dealing with a child with a temper tantrum.
Yeah, for sure. And how far do you want to push it? I suppose. I mean, because like as Melanie Joly said, don't take the bait. But if nothing is done, and then January 20th comes along and he signs this executive order, which putting into play these tariffs, and then suddenly our manufacturing industry is left. I mean, I don't know how long it would take for that to ripple into the economy. But if we start shedding jobs, tens of thousands of jobs, I would think that at that point you could really have nothing to lose, I suppose. Is that what we kind of wait for?
I know. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I was listening to some of the premiers that were speaking about this last night on the news, and their argument is that cooler heads will prevail. That particularly the governors of the northern states, the senators from the northern states, that do a lot of trade with us are going to very quickly, and powerful states like New York are going to say, well, no, this is wrong, and that somehow that's going to change things. That's a second part of that argument, which you might want to check. My take basically though is this: that even though I know there are emergency measures that the president can take and use if he needs to, I suspect that there's going to be a lot of other things that are going to be distracting him, or his office is going to be telling him he needs to pay attention to first. So I don't exactly accept. I could be totally wrong about this. I don't exactly accept the premise that on day one these tariffs are going to go into place. We'll see if I'm right about that one. But otherwise, the take seems to be, well, whatever happens, it won't be very long because people will realize very quickly that this is hurting the United States as well as it's hurting Canada. I think that's absolutely true, by the way. So that seems to be their strategy. I'm assuming, because we're hearing that that these things are happening, but we don't know what they are. I'm assuming that the government of Canada and particularly the provinces like Ontario are coming up with a counter strategy, and I think the Canadian public would like to know, even if they can't tell us what that strategy is. That kind of undermines the strategy. That they are prepared and ready and know what, have a plan in place. It's tricky that we don't know what's going on, and of course the circumstance in Ottawa with the change in leadership doesn't make that any better. I am relieved that Dominic LeBlanc is staying on in his position, because I think he's probably the one person up there that actually has a handle on all these things. So at least that's a step forward.
All right, so when it comes to Dominic LeBlanc, some Liberal MPs are pushing for him to reconsider running for the party leadership. So of all the names that have been floated out there, do any stand out to you that might be able to be a front runner at this point, or what's your take on the field so far?
Yeah, I thought he was probably close to being a front runner, if not the front runner. The interesting thing about people like Dominic LeBlanc is that he has a reputation inside of Ottawa, which I think exceeds the reputation that he has, even in his own province. He's very well respected in Ottawa. He's very well respected by when I don't know if you heard Doug Ford last night praising him. I mean, that's strong praise from a premier of a different party. And so the premiers like him, cabinets like him, caucus likes him. So he's in a really strong position to be a leader. Right now, he's kind of the prime minister's prime minister. He's doing the job. But with him out as a contender, well, I don't know. The Freeland, of course, has a strong following. Carney seems to have a strong following. Carney is the one that I find interesting, not because I think he's necessarily any better than the other candidates. There's two things about Mark Carney that I'm fascinated by. Is number one, why he wants to do this in the first place, which I don't understand at all. But second of all, why the CPC, the Conservative Party, seems to be the one that they're the most concerned about. And again, I'm not sure I understand why that is, but that makes him very interesting. But there is an interesting list of cabinet ministers and other people who are not household names, who I guess we will get to know now. But beyond those three, I don't know if there's anyone that I would call a front runner.
Right, but what a desperate situation it'll be to inherit, because they'll be the prime minister for a very short amount of time. And then Parliament will reconvene after the end of the prorogation, and there will be a throne speech, and the government will fall shortly thereafter. So I don't know. Like you said, why would anybody want it? Why would anybody want to be in that situation? And would the arrangement, or would it be known that whomever is selected, that this next election will be a bit of a gimme, and then you'll have 4 years as leader to rebuild? Or what do you think the dynamic will look like for whomever is the leader at that time?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I'm wondering the same thing. But I don't know how you would make that deal. I don't know because
right. You can't say I promise to be a great leader after I lose the election. Outwardly, that can't be the message.
No, and the Liberal Party constitution does have a mandatory review after election is lost, so you'd have to have the membership on side as well. But without pretending that I know what's going on in their minds, is it possible that some people are quite willing to do that because that's about the best they're going to be able to do right now? Maybe some of them are young enough to think that they'll be out and then they'll come back in. That's tricky. But maybe they're saying, my choice is that I'm going to give it everything I got because this is the end. This is the end of our chance of me being anything important in this party. There's a long rebuilding process, so I will at least be able to do this. Is that what's going on? It's a huge question. I confess to be completely puzzled by it, but I guess maybe it's a sense of duty to the party. Somebody has to do it, but what's surprising is that so many seem to want to do it. I would have thought that it'd be a situation where they were desperate to get people to come forward.
Yeah, do you think Trudeau gives an endorsement for anybody, or is that something that probably you won't do?
Probably not, and it's probably a bad idea. Though again, it's something we always have to keep in mind. It's hard to keep straight the fact that we're talking here about predicting who the Liberal Party and Liberal Party supporters want versus who the public of Canada want. And Liberal Party supporters may be quite happy with people who are seen as loyal or have been loyal to the Prime Minister, as opposed to the public who's saying, well, wait a second, that's baggage. So I don't know whether the baggage question is important right now. It'll be obviously important in the next election, but maybe right now that's not the case. But it could very well be that the candidates want to at least separate themselves to a certain extent anyway. Because again, one of the factors that would I guess will go into the calculation from the Liberal membership is who is the best person to salvage something from the next election, and that could then bring back in the factor of, do you want to be carrying Trudeau baggage or not?
Don, always appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. Take care.
All right, take care. Don Desserud, UPEI Political Science Professor. Nova Scotia Hospice Palliative Care Association launches Phase 2 of Healing Pathways Community Funding Program. This when we come back. The Nova Scotia Hospice Palliative Care Association is announced its Phase 2 launch of the Healing Pathways Community Funding Program, now open for applications from eligible nonprofit community organizations. Tim Guest is the organization's executive director and joins us to discuss this. Tim, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be with you.
All right, so tell us more about the work that your organization does.
Yeah, so the Nova Scotia Hospice and Palliative Care Association has a long history of supporting communities and individuals through grief. And we were selected by the Nova Scotia government to partner with communities and Nova Scotia Health to assist with the implementation of grief, bereavement, and emotional wellness services across the province as part of the joint Nova Scotia Government and Public Health Agency of Canada response to the Mass Casualty Commission recommendations, and they were specifically to address the need for mental health, grief, and bereavement supports by communities. One aspect of that is our Community Pathways Community Funding Program, and what it set out to do is to support organizations address grief, bereavement, and emotional wellness needs that they identify in their communities, to have a community-based response, and to increase our capacity as communities to care for each other in times of crisis.
Okay, how many organizations are there out there that would be eligible here to apply for this funding?
Many. Part of the benefit of this grant is it's fairly broad. It allows organizations to be innovative with how they support communities, and the supports could be very specific to delivering education to individuals such as first responders. It could be programs aimed specifically at targeted groups, but it could also be wellness sorts of initiatives where they're creating capacity and opportunity for the community to come together and support each other. So I think there's opportunity for many organizations to come forward and put in an application.
Okay, so I suppose tangibly, how might the money be used? How might this be a benefit for organizations? How would it be through outreach, through hiring people? How might this money be best used?
Yeah, it could be a combination. What we saw in phase one, it was funding was used to obtain education to better support the community. It was to increase capacity. As an example, one community asked for funding to be able to modernize their kitchen so that they could support events, that the community could come together and utilize the facility for events. There were training programs. There were a variety of things: art therapy, music therapy. It could be, for people. It could, it could be for, enhancing the facility that is being used. A huge variety of things.
Mm-hmm. What's the selection criteria?
So the selection criteria includes the organizations needing to be nonprofit or charities, or they can be a collaboration, but the organization that applies for the grant needs to have a nonprofit status. And we have a list of eligible things, like they can get project materials, supplies, use it for people, marketing, outreach, venue rentals, catering, those sorts of things, training. And those are the things that they can use it for. They can't be pre-existing programs that they're wanting to fund that are already in operation. What we're looking for is organizations to be creative, creating new capacity and new supports and programs to help address grief, bereavement, and emotional wellness in the community. They can't be for things that are covered by other funding that they may have in place, as just some examples.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if people are interested or they want to know more about it, how do they do so?
Yeah, so our applications are now open, and they're open through February the 14th of this year. We are hosting an information webinar on Monday, January 13th at 6 p.m. And organizations can go to our website and register for the webinar. And we'd really encourage organizations that are interested in applying for the grants to join the webinar. We'll be going through the criteria, we'll be going through the process, and certainly answering any questions that they may have. Our goal is for the process to be easy and for them to feel really supported. And we got some really good feedback from the first phase that's the experience that the first group of organizations had.
Okay, Tim, appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this. Good luck.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity.
All right, take care. Tim Guest, Executive Director of the Nova Scotia Hospice Palliative Care Association. I talked with the wildfires in California when I kicked off the show. Another Canadian province is offering to help to fight the deadly Los Angeles area wildfires. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says the province will spare no expense in helping California, and he's directed officials to send every available water bomber to the state. Crews from Quebec and British Columbia are already there battling against the fires that have killed at least 5 people and forced thousands to flee their homes. And again, if you've not seen, as I'm sure some of you have not, but many of you have, the imagery from there and the video from California, it is just unbelievable as fire continues to ravage and roars out of control with no end in sight, with bone-dry conditions. It hasn't rained there in over 100 days. And those Santa Ana winds whipping up the flames, and it's scary stuff, folks. It really is. Palisades and all those iconic areas and all those multi-million-dollar homes. And it's a humbling thing, Mother Nature, that's for sure. It absolutely is. All right, what does Democracy Watch think of prorogation? We'll find out from Duff Conacher when we come back.
Facts.
Joining us is Duff Conacher, co-founder of the organization Democracy Watch. Duff Conacher, thanks for joining the show.
My pleasure.
How long's Democracy Watch been around? I mean, you guys got some history now, don't you?
Yes, since 1993.
Wow. What inspired you to want to form Democracy Watch?
Well, I worked with Ralph Nader as intern in his Washington office. And if people know about him, he was leading consumer and other issues advocate in the U.S. for decades before that. And then went to law school and was looking for a group that does work on some of the issues he worked on, which are democratic good government, corporate responsibility. And there wasn't a group in Canada, so started it up with proceeds from a book that I co-authored with him that was a bestseller in Canada called Canada First.
Okay, there you go. There's a little history lesson on your organization, and there's certainly no shortage of things to discuss. There never has been, but this prorogation of Parliament is something that you have serious issues with, and are going to and want to create a court challenge. Have you challenged this in court yet, or will you?
Well, we've heard that another challenge has been launched, and so Democracy Watch will either file its own case, and those cases will likely be combined into one, because obviously courts wouldn't have two similar cases going through at the same time, or we will plan to intervene in that other case and make our legal arguments for why the prorogation should be declared unconstitutional. And we also have a long-term ongoing campaign to stop these kinds of abuses of power by prime ministers and premiers, who can really, even when they're in a minority government situation like the Trudeau government's in now, run things like they have a majority, because the prime minister has this power to shut down Parliament, open it up when the prime minister wants, call a snap election, and all of these things are unfair to the system and really amount to abuses of power. So we're trying to get rules in place, and hopefully a court ruling on this will help push towards getting some strong rules in place to restrict these kind of abuses of power.
All right. Why do you feel it's unconstitutional?
Well, we'll see what the courts say. Nobody really knows. Again, there are no written rules. But when you have a situation of all the opposition parties in a minority government situation, so the opposition parties represent a majority of MPs, saying that they are going to vote non-confidence in the government, which would trigger an election, should one MP, even if it's the Prime Minister, be able to thwart that by shutting down Parliament? Mm-hmm. And we don't think that should be allowed, and we think that the court should rule that it's not justifiable to shut down Parliament, that our system is supposed to work where Parliament operates based on how a majority of MPs want Parliament to operate, including when it's open and when it's shut down. And we're going to be relying quite a bit on a Supreme Court ruling in the UK, Great Britain, where unanimously they said that a prorogation of Parliament by then Prime Minister Boris Johnson back in 2019 was illegal and unconstitutional because a majority of MPs in the Parliament wanted to keep Parliament open at the time it was shut down.
All right, so Mary Simon, who makes the decision, the Governor General, how much consultation would she have done when it comes to this, if any?
She would have consulted with her legal counsel, maybe some outside lawyers as well. Mm-hmm. The problem is she has no written rules to refer to, and she's appointed by the Prime Minister. Mm-hmm. And is sitting there saying, what do I do? This Prime Minister's elected. I'm appointed. Do I say that the Prime Minister can't do what the Prime Minister wants to do? I don't have any rule to point to say it's illegal. And so what happens in these situations, and it's happened with premiers as well in several provinces in the past couple of decades, they always defer and say you can do whatever you want. You're only one MP in Parliament, but you get to tell all MPs in Parliament what to do. You're allowed to be a dictator in that way. And that's not how the system should work. Politicians from all parties in Great Britain, Australia, and New Zealand years ago wrote down rules that restrict things like snap elections and define what a vote of non-confidence is and say when the legislature has to be open and when it can be closed. Unfortunately, politicians in Canada, the opposition parties are really to blame. They've been in minority government situations, and they've allowed the Prime Minister to abuse them by shutting down Parliament in these kind of situations or calling snap elections. And they could have stopped it if they'd all, opposition parties in minority parliaments, again, they have the majority of the seats and they can pass through laws. And they haven't done it anywhere in Canada. And it's really silly because, again, politicians in Great Britain and Australia and New Zealand, when they had minority government, said, wait a second, this will be totally unfair unless we have written rules that will restrict the Prime Minister from abusing the Prime Minister's powers. So hopefully a court ruling will say, even if it does allow Trudeau's prorogation, will say, however, if the situation had been this, then it would be unconstitutional and the Governor General would be able to say no, and that would be a step forward to stopping this abuse of power.
Okay, the fact that this government did receive confidence in I think 3 non-confidence motions were defeated. So from Parliament leading up to the prorogation, does that come into play at all?
It does. And again, we don't know how the courts are going to rule, and there is evidence on both sides. You had the opposition party leaders saying recently they'd vote non-confidence, but at the same time, 3 non-confidence votes were defeated, as you mentioned, and also 3 bills were passed that were government bills in December. So the evidence is mixed in this area, but what we're hoping is even if the court does allow this prorogation, that the court will still take a positive step forward by setting out some guidelines as to what would be an illegal prorogation. This is the first time this case has been before the courts in Canadian history. And again, we're hoping the courts will take the opportunity to make it clear what is a legal, justifiable prorogation versus what would be an illegal, unjustifiable prorogation.
All right, what would the scenario be, Duff, where it would be something that you'd be okay with, or that shouldn't say you be, that you feel it would be constitutional? What paint a scenario, a hypothetical, if you will, where prorogation would be okay?
The Trudeau, up until this point, has generally been following what we thought should be part of the system, which is he's only prorogued in the past, and this one as well, when Parliament is adjourned. Mm-hmm. So that's a good time for a prorogation. Parliament is on a winter break right now. Parliament, as most people probably know, also breaks in the summer, so it's not sitting. And that's a good time to have a prorogation. If the government wants to do a reset, well, then you're not shutting down daily question period to do that. And then secondly, there should be just some kind of guideline as to what would be a clear expression from opposition party leaders that they're going to vote non-confidence in the government. And if that is clearly expressed, then that would make it illegal for the Prime Minister or at the provincial level, a Premier, to shut down Parliament to avoid that non-confidence vote. So those are 2 big ones that we need in place. And again, the opposition parties could have forced this with written rules long ago that would have restricted Trudeau from doing this. And again, they didn't act in their self-interest, and now they're facing this situation where one MP has been able to thwart the opposition parties from having Parliament open when they want it.
Okay, what type of timeline are we talking here before these court challenges work their way through the system?
Well, in this case, the case has been filed. They've asked for an expedited hearing. If we file, we'll be asking for an expedited hearing as well. And if we intervene, we're not going to try and delay things at all. But it is difficult to get something through before the prorogation is over, which is why this case is almost more about hoping that the court will set out clear rules for the future as much as it is trying to stop this current prorogation, because the prorogation is only running for 2.5 months or so, and so it will be difficult to get a ruling. The hearing may happen before March 24th when Parliament's supposed to open again, but the judge could then take months to rule on it. So we'll see what happens with the whole schedule. And, you can't force a judge to do a quick ruling. All you can do is you can request an expedited hearing, and usually the courts grant that in these kind of situations.
Okay, Duff, appreciate your input. Thank you so much. We'll do it again.
Thank you very much. I'll keep you up to date as things develop.
Okay, great stuff. Take care. Duff Conacher, co-founder of Democracy Watch. Pedestrian injuries. Advocate says Halifax goals for safety unmet after another walker is killed. We'll get to this with Norm Collins when we come back. Right, before we talk with our next guest, the Halifax Mooseheads hosting the Sea Dogs Saturday night. And if you'd like to go, we've got a couple of pairs of tickets, 2 pairs of tickets to see the Sea Dogs. And if you'd like those tickets, be caller 7 and caller 9 now at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. If you'd like to get a pair of tickets, we're giving 2 pairs of tickets away, caller 7 and 9. Give us a call now at 902-405-6000 if you'd like those tickets. All right, joining me now for a chat is Norm Collins, founder of Crosswalk Safety Society of Nova Scotia. And Norm, unfortunately, whenever I invite you on the show, it's not for a good reason, and this is a tragic instance of that again.
My best year will be the year that I have no contact with the media.
I know.
Here we are.
I know, unbelievable. Okay, so this is in reaction to the latest incident in a crosswalk. Let everybody know what happened, please, first of all.
There was a collision at a crosswalk in Dartmouth on Victoria Road and Chapel Street. I think it was Monday morning. 72-year-old gentleman was struck and tragically passed away sometime, I believe, later that day. He was in a marked crosswalk. At least there was a summary offense ticket issued to the driver, so stating. And, there we have somebody, obviously, who went out. It was early in the morning. It was around 7 a.m., who went out for their morning walk, presumably, and didn't come home, and there's a driver who is no doubt traumatized. It's just all bad in so many ways.
All right, so according to the statistics, the numbers are not trending in the right direction here, despite a goal in 2018 that the city set out to cut back in the number of pedestrians killed or injured in collisions by 20% over 5 years. The data shows that target was not reached, and so the numbers don't look good.
That's true. That's accurate. The number of injury and injury to pedestrians and fatalities, the average of 2018 and 19 was 134. That's what that goal was set against. And 80% of that would be 107. In 2023, at the end of that 5-year period, there were 143. And it appears from what Halifax Traffic said to another reporter that it's going to be around 150 this year, which is what it's tracking for. We don't have final year-end data yet. So let's say it is the 150. Obviously, that's almost 40% above what the goal was for 2023. And, of course, we would have expected further improvement in 24.
Mm-hmm. All right, so what measures can be taken that aren't taken now?
I want to start by saying that traffic certainly has done things over the last number of years. They've implemented leading pedestrian intervals, which gives pedestrians a bit of a head start. We have a number of rectangular rapid flashing beacon lights at crosswalks. Obviously, going back a little further, the crosswalk flag program and other things. So it would be unfair of me to say that traffic hasn't done some things. But no matter what the efforts are, it's the results that matter, and the results are going the wrong way. So the question is, what more can be done? And certainly at intersections, we believe that different sort of protected phasing, more no left turns at certain times in the sequence at the intersection. Anytime you put a vehicle and a pedestrian in the same place at the same time, you're asking for problems. No right turns on red. If Montreal can have no right turns on red, it kind of baffles the mind why Halifax can't do something similar. I'm a big proponent of putting rumble strips, similar to the carvings at the Cobequid in front of the toll booths there. So as you're driving through there and they're trying to get you to slow down, you cross these rumble strips or, I don't know how to describe it, but, in the road, so that would alert you to the fact that something is coming up ahead, obviously a crosswalk. That would be something that would be relatively inexpensive and I would think relatively easy to implement. There's better lighting. Consistently hear of complaints about poor lighting around crosswalks. These things can happen. Unfortunately, they do cost money, and we are going into a budget process right now. But the amount that's being budgeted for traffic for road safety is actually a decrease. The proposal that we've seen is a decrease from last year. It is less than the money being used for bike lanes. It is less than less than half of the money being proposed for parks. And don't get me wrong, I'm very pro parks. We need them. They help in mental health and all kinds of things. I am pro bike lanes and getting people into active transportation. What I'm not convinced of is that both of those, we should be spending more money in those areas than on road safety where people are actually dying, as well as being injured, which can be life-altering.
How about enforcement?
Yeah, we've spoken a lot about enforcement. Even the Canadian Association of Police Chiefs have said that if you decrease enforcement, you will worsen road safety. Here, these numbers come from the Provincial Department of Justice. And in 2012, there were 11,954 tickets issued for speeding. In 2023, that number had reduced to 1,901, an 84% decrease in speeding tickets in HRM. There's similar, not quite as dramatic, but similar decreases to distracted driving, and other, not yielding to pedestrians, and basically across the board. And if there are not consequences to drivers' actions, I guess human nature will say if my chance of getting caught is minimal, then they seem to accept that speeding is okay. And we presented this information to the Board of Police Commissioners, and we hear nothing in response, and nothing seems to change. It'll be interesting to see when the 24 numbers come out, which will be in the next few months. But, we have dramatically decreased the amount of enforcement. Education here is non-existent. There used to be a Heads Up Halifax program. It was discontinued a few years ago. Rather than, if it's not working, don't discontinue it. Figure out why it's not working and do something. All of the research would say that education and enforcement are important to road safety, and even the recently adopted road safety strategy speaks to both education and enforcement, and they're just not happening.
And, of course, red light cameras, this is something that we need to get the province on board with, but so far we've not had any progress on that.
Well, I don't know if that's actually accurate. I have talked to my MLA and a representative from Public Works, and they are working on it. Philosophically, I don't believe that there's any issue. What I've been told is that there is a lot of technology in the background. The camera, it's one thing to take a photo, it's another thing to communicate to the police, to the courts, to the individual. I do understand that there is stuff to be done. You just don't snap your fingers. That having been said, it's been 6+ years. And, it seems to be that no matter how much you want to say the technology is holding it up, it's been over 6 years, and that's way too long to implement this and to use it as every other province in the country does. We're, from what I've been able to find, we're the only province that doesn't have photo radar.
Really? New Brunswick has photo radar?
Yes, that is my understanding. There's one of the provinces that it was technically a pilot project. I'm not sure if it was New Brunswick or Newfoundland.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, everybody has it.
Okay. Okay, Norm, listen, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much, and we'll unfortunately talk again.
Yeah, sadly, no doubt we will. But, I just encourage drivers, please slow down. Please, be aware, be alert, scan for pedestrians. And pedestrians also be alert. Whenever you're stepping out on the road, make sure that you're looking for vehicles. We can all hope that everybody's paying attention to each other, but sometimes they don't, and it's incumbent upon all of us to be more attentive.
Okay, thanks, Norm. Appreciate it. Take care. Norm Collins, founder, Crosswalk Safety Society of Nova Scotia. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks to Vanessa Vandeness as well. On the other side of the glass at the control boards, doing a fine job. As always, we're back tomorrow, 10 o'clock. See you then.